You're listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, with service members from across the military sharing their stories of combat and survival. And now, here's your host, Mark Zinno.
Welcome into the Hazard Ground Podcast. As always, we appreciate you joining us each and every week. Before we get to this week's guest, a retired Green Beret who had an alive day in Iraq where he survived. That's going to get the tonnage here, right? 500 gallons of diesel fuel, 2,100 555 millimeter rounds, and a quarter of metric tons of TNT survived that blast to live and tell his story. We'll get to that coming up here in just a few moments. First, on normal announcements. Again, as always, follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Hazard Ground Podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, smash that like button, give a thumbs up to all the content there. Love to read your guys' comments. Please leave them there as you watch the show on YouTube. Appreciate you guys taking part in that. Leave Apple reviews, leave all your reviews everywhere. Give us 5 stars. Tell us why you love the show. And continue to support our Amazon promotion on our website. Go to hazardground.com. Click on the Amazon button at the bottom of the homepage or one of the sponsors tab, and you can be directed right to Amazon. You do all your normal Amazon shopping. We'll get a percentage of what you guys spend, and I'll donate a percentage of that back to some of the charities and organizations you've heard featured here on the show. So if you'd like to donate to veterans somehow, you can do it by just doing normal Amazon shopping, but you got to go to hazardground.com first and click on that Amazon button so we get the referral. Appreciate you guys doing that as always. And if you need to contact us, go to our website, hazardground.com, and click on the Contact Us button. Love to hear from you guys. If you have any guest suggestions, please send them our way. We always love hearing them. And if you have a guest suggestion, if you have contact information, that also helps too. Makes our job a little bit easier as far as getting them on. But again, hazardground.com, the place to go. All right, this week's guest is a retired Army CW3, spent almost 25 years in uniform, 17 of that with the Green Berets, 8 total deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, plus multiple other deployments around the world. Had his alive day back in 2005, actually, when I was in Iraq at the same time, although not in the same location. Told you about the size of what he survived and lived to tell about it. He's also a teammate and a member of Daryl Utt, former Hazard Ground guest, who told his story a couple of months ago. He is Ryan Neel joining us here on the Hazard Ground. Ryan, welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Oh, appreciate you for having me on, Mark.
That's a badass background, man. For those watching on YouTube, that's legit. So we appreciate you going big or going home, so to speak.
I try. Yeah, I actually I made that in Afghanistan on my last deployment in some of my spare time. So something I hold near and dear to my heart.
Well, it looks great. I'll say that much. All right, we got a lot to get to here. In April 2005, but let's start back at the beginning and how and why you got in the Army.
Well, it's an interesting story. I didn't really know what I wanted to do in college. Both my parents were educators. Prior to my mother passing away, so I had strong support for education, but I didn't really feel it was for me, so I started looking around what my options were. And funny, I called the Marine recruiter the Army recruiter asking for the Marine recruiter's number, because I wanted to be force recon. I wanted to do something that was really high speed, cool. Of course, I had no idea what I was talking about at the time, but called the Army guy, and the rest is history. He ended up snagging me for the Army. So that's pretty much how I got into the Army. And then, I was just interested in pushing myself and seeing what I could do, how far I could go. And, before I knew it, graduated Ranger School within 2 years of joining the Army, became a squad leader in the scout platoon, and then eventually, went SF and found myself in 10th Special Forces Group.
Well, okay, so you end up going infantry, is that right?
Yeah, I was an 11 Bravo light infantry right out of the gate, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. I loved the physical challenges. I loved the just everything about it. Going to the field, embracing the suck, so to speak, and the crappy weather, the bugs, everything. I thought it was fun.
That's one word to describe it. I guess we might have different definitions of fun, but yeah, I mean, everybody's got a different mindset. You end up at Fort Campbell for your first duty station. where I don't want to skip too far ahead, but coincidentally, you end up in Afghanistan before you ever become a Green Beret. But you also went to Saudi Arabia and Kosovo. Like, I mean, when you signed up, did you think like, hey, I'm going to go travel and see the world? I mean, is that kind of what was in your mind at the same time?
Well, kind of. I mean, when I was growing up, my dad was a college professor, and for my seventh grade year, I lived in Africa. My dad took a sabbatical leave, and he taught at the university there, just outside of the capital of Nairobi, in a small town called Njoro. And I went to a British boarding school for a year, and so I guess I was predisposed to experiencing a lot of cultures, different languages, and just I grew to really appreciate that. And so when I joined the Army, at the time, I mean, it was mid '90s. There wasn't really any conflicts going on, so to speak, and I guess in some way, shape, or form, I envisioned that I'd probably find myself overseas somewhere, doing something, but in no way did I envision what the future held for me.
When you end up in Kosovo and places like that, I mean, at that point in time, did you think that was as close to combat that as you would ever see?
Yeah, I think so, probably. I mean, it was an interesting time. The air campaign had just ended shortly after we got there, and then it turned into the ground campaign. And so, it was pretty interesting to see the evolution. The military tactical agreement expired while we were there on that rotation. And so there was a lot of uncertainty. People didn't know what was going to happen, with the border situations and whatnot. And, it was interesting because I was a scout squad leader, and I was able to operate in small teams along the border, doing reconnaissance patrols, gathering intel, seeing what was going on to inform the bigger picture. A lot of helicopter infills late at night, exfills late at night. So it was really unique. It was really interesting. I don't know how many people were having experiences like that in situations as real as Kosovo was, but it was fairly unique from what I understand.
All right, so where are you on 9/11?
So 9/11, I was a scout squad leader still in headquarters company, 2nd Battalion, 187, Roxons, and my company commander basically put me in charge of PT that morning, and he gave me a challenge. He said, "Hey, I bet you can't smoke everybody here." And I was like, "Okay, I got you guys' number."
Oh, he
So,
was one of those guys, yeah.
oh yeah, oh yeah. I took it as a challenge, and so I took him out on a long run, really fast, wore everybody out, and afterwards we broke and went to shower up, eat breakfast, and get ready for the day. And true to form, I got ready early, and I was in the platoon area, and all of a sudden somebody came down and they were like, "Hey, you gotta check out what's going on TV." And so I went upstairs to the company ops area, and I saw what was going on. And I believe after the second aircraft hit the tower, that was about the time when everybody started getting spun up. Platoon sergeant came in, first sergeant, company commander. The other companies really started, bustling with activity, and immediately, we knew the gravity of what was going on. So it was a matter of getting everybody contacted. Some people had gone off post, to their houses to shower up, eat breakfast, whatever, and the way that they ended up locking down all the bases. Some of those individuals, they weren't even able to get back on base until late that night, or even the next morning, sometime next day. So it was really interesting. And then it just went into a rapid process of, packing list inventories, layouts, prepping everything for deployment. Coincidentally, my unit had just assumed the deployment readiness for status one, DRF1, for the 101st. So, we were essentially, the first in the chute from the 101st, getting ready.
Yeah, I can remember being on ground in Afghanistan in '01, seeing that big Rakissan's statue right there. Was it Bagram or Canada? I think it was Bagram. Yeah, it was Bagram.
Yeah.
So that's where you end up. Now, the war kicks off in October, obviously. Interestingly enough, with a lot of Green Berets on the ground there.
Yeah.
If you know how the beginning of that war went, as we were, started the bombing campaign, which is crazy to think. For those who don't, I'll just give you you basically had 2-man special forces teams sitting on the top of a mountaintop by themselves for 12 to 16 hours at a time, just calling in strikes all day long, making sure they're covered and concealed, not being found, calling in strikes. And then 2 more guys would walk up the mountain and relieve them. Those 2 guys would walk down. And that went on for a couple of weeks at the very outset of the campaign. So to give you a level of idea of what Green Berets are capable of, it's that kind of, level of infiltration, but, also efficiency and ability to call in airstrikes from where they are. That said, when do you guys actually get on ground for your first deployment?
Well, so we, my unit actually got on ground December 18th.
Okay.
We originally went to Jacobabad, Pakistan, and staged from there. And actually, as everything was going on, as Anaconda was kicking off and everything, I had actually done a handover with my assistant squad leader, and I was in the process of going back to the States to attend selection, special forces selection.
So you were going to selection before 9/11 happened?
No, actually, I didn't.
Okay.
So we loaded out. Backing up a little bit, I had gone to CAG selection in the spring of '01.
All right. So what made you do that, though? I'm sorry for skipping around, but I thought chronologically you had done this after your first deployment. So I just want to catch everybody up.
Yeah. So I went to CAG selection, Delta Force selection in the spring of '01. I made it through, but I was a non-select at the very end.
Why did you want to do Delta so badly?
Well, because I really wanted to push myself as hard as I could, and it was to me what the pinnacle was. I really had no idea what I was thinking or talking about. I'd learn later on, but I had already had I think 3 special forces Green Beret selection packets submitted. I did my first packet submission the Monday after I graduated Ranger School in 1998, and they told me, hey, bud, cool your jets. The 101st has you for a year for use after sending you to the school. So I had submitted another packet. My unit told me, hey, we need you. You're a squad leader. Best interest of the unit type stuff. So I was like, all right, I'll stay here. Did whatever training, submitted another packet, and then we were getting ready to go to Kosovo, and then Afghanistan eventually. But it was in Afghanistan that selection packet, most recent one, actually went through. And so my battalion sergeant major, my company sergeant major, and my platoon sergeant, they all came to me when we were in Jacobabad getting ready to launch, and they basically said, hey, you need to decide what you're going to do, because if you don't decide, the Army's going to decide for you. And it was at that moment that I had a little bit of clarity. I'd already been in the same unit for about 5 years. I was already an E6 in the same battalion, E1 to E6. And basically they were telling me, you need to do something. And so I said, all right. And I accepted the selection packet, and I deployed back to the States to attend selection. That was surreal. It was a little bit uncomfortable, knowing what was going on. And I had just left, and that was the guys that I had been with for a number of years. We'd gone through a number of training iterations, maybe previous deployments to that, And so, I felt a little guilty at the time of leaving, but I knew in the back of my mind that what I was, starting was going to throw me back at the tip of the spear, again and again and again. So
Right.
I took some comfort in that.
So initially, when you get to Afghanistan, you never. So technically, you never actually got to Afghanistan, or you did end up going on the first.
I did not actually go to
Right.
Afghanistan. I had to pull out just because the way the flights and everything were stacking up.
Right. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. The timing of the whole thing. Very, very, very. I guess just curious. It's just when I was going down the bio and looking at him, like, okay, he was on the. I remember the Rakkasans being in Afghanistan right after Operation Anaconda in late 01 into early 02. So it made sense. You end up going to assessment selection way back in the day, back when it was, I guess, was it more difficult back then? Do you think?
Everybody says they were in the last hard class. Whether it's Ranger School, selection, whatever. It's challenging regardless.
Yes.
We didn't have a lot of team events when it went through. It was mainly individual assessment. The long range movement, individual movement, LRIM was still a thing. That was like the culmination. And I can't remember how many miles it was, but I think it was maybe over 30 miles with a heavy pack, navigating in the day, night, from point to point. And I remember going through that and thinking to myself that this is it's not very hard, because I was comparing everything to that previous CAG selection that I went to in early 01. So whether it's harder now or it was harder before, I can't really say. I think it's as hard as you make it. If you're willing to push yourself to the limits, anything can stress you out.
Did the instructors at assessment selection, the evaluators, did they know that you had already went to Delta?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Still to this
Typically,
day.
they would probably try to ride you a little bit harder then, right?
Well, I don't know. Still to this day, I don't even know what's in those selection profiles.
Right.
It'd be interesting to see what they were saying about me, all the way back then. But
Did you know what you wanted to do within the Green Berets?
yeah, absolutely. I always had an interest in medicine. When I was in Kosovo, our battalion surgeon, because I was in the scout platoon, we were co-located with the quarters element. And so it was a unique opportunity. Our battalion surgeon put on a EMT course while we were there. And that really spurred my interest, reinforced my interest. Got to do some things at one of the hospitals on Camp Bondsteel. So when I went to selection, they give you a list. You can write out your top picks. You're not guaranteed any of them, but given the fact that 18 deltas were pretty much critically low for their fill, anybody that selected or chose 18 delta was getting it. And if you showed aptitude and you picked another MOS, more than likely you were getting stuck with 18 delta as well. But yeah, I really liked it. And when I came back from selection, fifth group was actually coming back from Afghanistan, the initial push that they had done. And so I was able to meet, some of the giants in fifth group. Tony Pryor was one of them, Buckethead, pretty good story about him. And my previous battalion surgeon, when I was in the infantry, not the one that put on that EMT course in Kosovo, but the one following, he was a prior 18 Delta who went to PA school. And he was the battalion PA for the Rakkasans when I was there. And so he had gone back to fifth group because he had gotten promoted and he was able to get back. And I just reached out to him and I was like, hey, I'm selected to be an 18 Delta, and I'd really like to, do some on-the-job training. My unit is still deployed in Afghanistan, so I don't want to be on rear D just doing paperwork, doing admin stuff. So I was able to do about 8 months of OJT at first to the fifth, and I was rated as an 18 Delta, even though my MOS was 11 Bravo still at that point. So, I got a lot of experience on, what the general roles and responsibilities were for an 18 Delta. I got to do a lot of immunizations across the board, getting them up to speed, because they were actually getting prepped for Iraq. The indicators were already out, and they were starting to prep. So it was a unique experience. And then from there, I went to the Q course.
So it's interesting, you have yet to actually go to combat. And again, we talked about Kosovo. I'm not going to downplay the level of what was going on there, but this is obviously different. But as you're in the special ops world now, you're starting to, touch people who have been to combat. What are they telling you? What are they talking about their experience, and what's sort of like your emotional response to what you're hearing?
I guess naively, my emotional response was, man, I want some of that. I want to
get there.
Yeah, and I think that was a fairly common response, because when it's just like in sports, nobody wants to ride the pine. Nobody wants to sit on the outskirts and watch things happen. Everybody wants to get in there and make an impact. And so that was my general perspective on things. The other side of it was kind of assessing what I was getting into, and I thought it was interesting. I was in awe of the stories I was hearing, and then just thinking about what my future can be, what I can do to contribute in the same fashion.
So we roll around to 2004. You finished the Q course. You go and end up going to 10th group. I don't know if you had any selection, any desire to go there, or you went wherever they sent you. Is that how it unfolded?
Not really. I mean, it unfolded well. I mean, I can't complain at all. But having been at Fort Campbell, where 5th group was, knowing a lot of people that had gone to 5th group from my unit, and having met some other SF guys from 5th group, just from different things around post training and whatnot, I put 5th group as my first choice. I wanted to go back there, and I think it was also because I had been in the Rock Suns. I was comfortable there. I knew the area. And yeah, I wanted to be comfortable, even though I was doing something that was going to force me to be uncomfortable. So I picked 5th group. I met my wife in Nashville, and so it kind of made sense. But I put 10th group as my second choice because my wife really wanted to get out of Tennessee. So luckily, we got 10th group. I was assigned 10th group, and she was happy with that. And that took us here.
Good old Fort Carson, Colorado. How quickly after you get to 10th group do you end up back in Iraq?
So it was really quick. I think that from the time I actually signed into my unit, 2nd Battalion, 10th Special Forces Group, to when we deployed was less than 30 days. I remember walking into my team room, meeting my team sergeant. He basically said, who are you? Where are you coming from? What'd you do? And, just a little butt sniffing kind of thing. And then I remember being pointed towards a garbage bag, just of, miscellaneous medical supplies. And he basically pointed at that and said, hey, Battalion Med just dropped that off. You need to, take care of it, divvy it out, make the first aid pouches for everybody. And if you need anything, I'll give you a call.
Yeah, interesting times. By the way, Lieutenant Colonel Swindell, that name ring a bell?
Oh yeah, Colonel Swindell. He was my battalion commander for, I believe, 3.
He was my battalion commander in Iraq. The second time you guys went back there in early 06.
Yep. And then later he went up to group and beyond.
Yeah. I distinctly remember a conversation I had with him. I'm fast forwarding here because I want to get to your day, but just for the synergy and connectivity here.
Yeah.
When I left that deployment at the end of it, he offered me a spot 2 assessment and selection when I at the end of that deployment. Really nice guy, very good leader. Pleasure to work with him. I think his XO was Major Bellinoit, if I remember that name correctly.
I believe so. Yeah, at that time.
Yeah. And I forget who the company commander was that I was under, but 2nd Battalion, 10th Group came in. I was with 3rd Battalion, 10th Group for the first half or the first third of my rotation. Then 2nd Bat, 5th Group came in, then 2nd Bat, 10th Group came in. And I spent the last 3 or 4 months with those guys from down at RPC, right there in Baghdad at the Palace on the Hill, with those guys. Yeah. So, it was,
it was interesting times.
Big army, small. It's a lot of small connections. All right. Anyway, so when do you get back to Iraq officially?
So I got back to Iraq.
Say for the first time. When do you get to Iraq?
The first time I deployed to Iraq was, I believe it was mid-November of 2004.
Okay. You guys at that point in time are doing what?
So at that point in time, we were at an Inticrit. We were at a team house just outside of in the city, outside of FOB Danger. FOB Danger was the large conventional base that was there in Tikrit, and our AOB, our company headquarters, was located over there. Our focus was engaging with the Iraqi military that was based out of the birthday palace in Tikrit. That's Saddam Hussein's, famous palace where he would always, have his birthday celebrations and shoot the pistol off of the balcony while he was observing. So our whole purpose really was, apart from prosecuting targets, was to train the Iraqi military. We established a basic training template for the regular Iraqi military, and then we developed a more advanced course practicum that was focused on CQB and things of that nature. And that element was our cadre in our teaching activities, and then they were also our strike force when we would go out and execute targets throughout Tikrit and the wider area.
All right. So at this point in time, though, kinetic operations are kind of slow. I mean, after, we get to the early part of 2004, after, quote, mission accomplished, everything sort of died down. The insurgency hadn't really started yet.
It was fairly quiet. I mean, like I said, the large focus of our efforts was training.
Right. Which was the same as mine when I got there in 05. I worked with the ISOF brigade. I built and stood up the support battalion of the ISOF brigade. But regardless, I only asked that to say, kind of leading up to, your Alive Day here in April of the following year. It's like, hey, not much going on here at this point in time, right? You're not seeing a lot of action, period.
Yeah. It was, we were executing targets, but, there really wasn't a lot of gunfights,
right.
per se. We were tracking, some intel streams that, our house was being targeted, that Tawhid wal Jihad, which was an active Al-Qaeda affiliate in the Beji Tikrit area of Saladin province. They were actively, trying to gather intel on us and target us. Because of our activities that we were doing with the Iraqi military. And, they had all these, perceptions that we were a hub for intel activities, and we were associated with the Israeli Mossad. I mean, the stories were pretty grandiose, but, they were targeting us, and we did an operation up in Beji, just north of Tikrit, to essentially do a snatch of the leader of Tawhid al-Jihad. And it was a daylight mission. Everybody's pucker factor was pretty high because we were, dressed up to reduce our signature. And we were in, unarmored, non-standard, indigenous operating vehicles, IOVs. And we left to crit. We coordinated with our QRF. We had a sister team that was up there in Beijing. And we also had some QRF assets lined up with the conventional forces that were there. And we rolled into town midday. The market was full of hundreds and hundreds of people. And, they were just feet away, looking inside the vehicle, everything. We made our turn to the, short final for the target, got out in front of the target, went down, got our individual that we were looking for. And we were off target in probably about 45 seconds.
Wow.
We went back.
Never goes that smooth.
No, I mean, it was, one of those times where everything went right.
Right.
And thankfully so, because, like I said, we the only armor we had was our body armor. The vehicles we were in were, just regular vehicles that blended into the environment. And that really kind of accelerated the planning and the actual execution of the attack on our team house on April 14th of 2005.
Well, yeah, I would assume the stinging or messing with the hornet's nest, so to speak, was that snatch and grab that you did. All right, so April 14th, 2005, you wake up, normal morning, early morning. How does it start for you?
Well, it was a normal morning. I was supposed to meet a couple of teammates downstairs in the kitchen of our team house, to eat breakfast, mix up our protein shakes, and head over to the gym, get a workout in. But I'd been up late the previous night, so I was hitting my snooze button. And that's probably what saved my life, because where my bed was positioned offered, enough defilade to essentially save my life. There was an open window and, out to our staging area for our vehicles and everything in just right out in front of the house. I remember hitting my snooze button, kind of being a little bit back into sleep. And I heard a couple of pop shots from one of our Kurdish Peshmerga guards. Didn't really think anything of it. Thought it was, just somebody slowed down. Somebody was doing something that they shouldn't have been doing on Highway 1 there. And, he was just giving them a warning shot to get them on their way. Well, the next thing I heard was a really loud crash. And it was immediately followed up with a couple of full auto bursts from that same guard. Immediately after the two full auto bursts, there was just this massive explosion. My eyes opened up, and all I could see was flames. My entire room was engulfed in fire. Anything and everything that could be, be turned into a projectile was flying through my room. I was lifted up and, kind of launched a little bit to almost an upright position. I'd taken a piece of shrapnel, large piece of shrapnel off my head. So it rang my bell pretty bad. I didn't lose consciousness, thankfully, because like I said, everything was on fire. All of my bedding, clothes was on fire. The wood of the furniture and stuff was just all splintered. There was glass everywhere, red hot metal from the vehicle, from the 155 millimeter HE rounds, the Humvee, pieces, everything just flew in. And, my first instinct was, I got to get out of here. I am not going to die in a fiery inferno. So I was barefoot. All I had on was a pair of Ranger panties, those little silky running shorts. made my way over, all the splintered wood, everything that was burning, the metal, the glass. I was getting just, jammed in my feet, but I didn't have any sensation of pain, anything. It was just, I got to get to the door and I got to get out. I ripped the handle out of the door. It was a solid wood door. Ripped the handle out and it wouldn't budge. A buddy of mine, whose room, teammate, whose room was right on the other side of mine. There was a wall that was separating our rooms, but previous to the final construction, I guess, of the house, there had been a doorway. Well, it had been bricked up and mortised and then plastered over, so it looked nice. But when the explosion happened, my buddy was in his bed, and he just remembers opening his eyes, and there was literally flames shooting through the wall, from my room through all of the the attempts to close that previous opening up. And the first thing that went through his mind was, Ryan's dead. There's no way anybody could have survived that. And so he and a couple others, they made their way to the door to my room. And at this point, everything, the fire was growing. The smoke had already come from the ceiling halfway down into the room. And I was starting to choke. And I was really worried about the fire, getting more intense, because I had a couple of, the aid station was in my room, and I had some O2 cylinders, some large D-cell O2 cylinders in there. So I was really worried about those getting too hot and exploding and, again, taking me out. Thankfully, they kicked the door down. And when they saw me, they were like, holy crap, like, are you okay? Because, I had a huge welt on the side of my head. I had, a little bit of blood from the shrapnel that was kind of oozing out. And I was barefoot, and, behind me, it was just fire. I just remember, kind of shaking my head, shaking the cobwebs out, looking at the two of them. And I just said, I'm good. I got to go. It's time to work. And so I pushed past them and, tried to go down the hall, and, they stopped me again, and they were like, hey, bro, like, you're walking in glass. And, at that moment I was like, well, okay, like whatever, that'll buff out. And they threw me some shower shoes from one of our other teammates' rooms. And, I just proceeded to go downstairs, kind of assess the situation, grab my A bag. I had to treat my team sergeant for some facial lacerations and some other things. Treated two of our interpreters for some shrapnel wounds. And then I assessed two other of my teammates, basically triaged them, and went back into the team room, leadership area, where all of our comm stuff was. And I told a couple people, hey, I'm grabbing my body armor and I'm going out. And I walked out. I had to navigate, past the blast crater that was still burning. Our ammo supply point was on fire. We had, all of our rounds were cooking off. Thankfully, none of the AT4s went off. None of the laws or 40 Mike. But, I had to navigate that, around that, through concertina, through, some other burning vehicles, to get to where some of the other casualties were. And in the process, I helped to reestablish security, get some of our other Kurdish Peshmerga guards repositioned. My team leader was out in another area, and he was doing the same thing. So it was just all about putting aside what was going on with me, and just focusing on the bigger picture. I mean, I knew that I was good. I knew that what I had going on, to the best that I could assess, was pretty superficial in nature. I didn't have any, pain that I would assess to, hollow organ injuries or anything like that from the blast overpressure. So I was like, yeah, I'm good. I just need to treat who needs to be treated, because I was the only 18 Delta, only medic on my team. And with a blast that size, I knew that, no doubt, people were going to be messed up. Thankfully, it was, the nature of injuries were pretty minimal, all things considered. The facial axe, my team sergeant, some minor lacerations on a couple others, and then our interpreters and a couple of our PASH guards. But the QRF response, I'd like to say that it went down very, very seamlessly. With one of our teammates calling up and essentially giving a brevity code for immediate QRF support. But there had to be a little back and forth. Nobody really expected that call to actually go out. So I think it struck them a little out of the blue. But we ended up getting some pretty fast response from the conventional forces, like I said, that were over at the birthday palace that we had been working with and everything. Conventional forces responded extremely quick. The Iraqi police, Iraqi fire department, and Iraqi National Guard at the point was what they were still called. They all responded. They assisted with pushing out security a little bit further. The fire department assisted with putting out the fires that were still around. My room was still a raging inferno at this point. But it was a really shitty situation that could have been made even shittier. But the collective effort and switched on awareness of a lot of people, outside of the immediate situation is really what saved the day, I believe.
If you're ever wondering, and again, I read the notes at the beginning of the episode, 500 gallons of diesel fuel, 155 high explosive artillery shells, and 1/4 metric tons of dynamite. If you're ever wondering what that explosion looks like, well, from both ends, the inside and the out, because you have video of this. The terrorists made a video of it, and you have it.
Yeah, I've actually I've got the terrorist video footage, and then I also have another angle from the triple canopy contractors that were over on FOB Danger. So, not surprising, the terrorist video footage was uploaded to the internet, pretty quickly after everything happened. And the vantage point that they had was from that cemetery that we had been stating that we were being, surveilled and whatnot from. So that was frustrating. But yeah, I do have the video footage. They're probably about 700 meters away, I would say, and you can see the blast wave after the explosion kicks off. You can see that blast wave coming towards them, and then it just shakes the trees and the guy filming. It was.
Do you ever wonder when you watch it how you survived it?
Yeah, I mean, knowing what I do about medicine, the training that we go through as 18 Deltas, understanding blast wave propagation, understanding, hollow organs and what blast overpressure can do.
Right.
I mean, I have no explanation as to why, my lungs were not, one big blood clot, why, my stomach didn't explode, why my bladder didn't explode, why my, brain didn't turn to mush. It's a miracle. I mean, I have no other way to explain it. I mean, the explosion was so powerful that it was heard, over in what's the big city to the south? Samara.
Smart,
They heard the blast all the way down to Samara. Over on FOB Danger, at the big division headquarters, which was probably about almost 2 miles away, it blew out over 50 windows on that building. And I was only about maybe 14, 15 meters away from ground zero. My teammates were in the house, relatively within same proximity. None of us were outside of probably a 50-meter radius, 50 to 75-meter radius from ground zero.
Wow. That's unreal. I guess your posture changed after that a little bit. At least on the bright side, it was frustrating that it came from the cemetery, but at least that that you now had grounds to go get the guys in the cemetery.
Yeah, we didn't end up going after them, in the cemetery. We ended up doing a mission to end up getting the younger brother of the guy that we had previously snatched, that really accelerated all this. We ended up getting him as well because he was the one that stepped up for his older brother when we captured him and pushed this through to actual execution. So it was it was a little bittersweet. But as far as changing mindset and security posture, 100%. I mean, when you deploy normally, to an austere location as a SFODA, we do a TVA, a threat vulnerability assessment, and we're trying to understand what we need to do to increase our security posture through either physical means or other means. And when we had first gotten to crit in November, mid-November of 2004, our security assessment for the house was that we needed some more barriers. We needed some additional physical barriers between Highway 1 and our team house. We needed to adjust where the entry control point was to the to our compound. And right or wrong, I'm not gonna point any fingers. I mean, it's been almost 20 years. We were told, hey, you don't need that. You're not going to get it. It's too much money, that those resources need to go elsewhere. And you're right across the street from this giant, base, FOB Danger. And we essentially just accepted that. Were there some things that maybe we could have done differently? Yeah. I mean, I would say we could. But immediately after, an entire Special Forces Operational Detachment Alpha almost got wiped off the face of the earth, along with all of our Kurdish Peshmerga guards, within, I would say, probably 48 hours or so, we ended up having those large Hemet semi-trucks that normally haul the M1 Abrams. We had, probably, I don't know, 20, 30 of those all lined up on Highway 1, and every single one was loaded up as much as they could carry of those big, Alaska barriers, T-walls.
Yeah.
They were just coming out of the woodwork to bolster the security posture, perimeter of our team house finally.
Yeah, I mean, listen, God's grace, right? Get you all through it. No reasonable explanation why. On the flip side, there's a story somewhere of somebody taking a small piece of shrapnel somewhere and bleeds out and dies. And I don't say that callously. It's just the nature of combat and what happens. It's incredibly difficult to account for. That's your first deployment. You end up going back in 06, 07, 09 to 010, and 11. So you end up going back there 4 more times after that. I know that's a lot of ground to cover, but I guess I'll ask the question this way. In those next 4 deployments, do you feel like you spent more time with direct action and kicking down doors and finding bad guys, or were you doing more medic stuff than you had thought you wanted to or planned to or whatever?
No, it greatly accelerated after that with the kinetic side of things.
Right.
My next deployment was to Bakuba. We
Oh,
were
good
there.
area of town.
Yeah, oh yeah, very nice garden spot. A lot of activity there. A couple more IED strikes to our vehicles. A couple of firefights. The one after that, we started out in Iskandariyah, and then we got refocused when the SEALs lost the emergency response brigade mission in Baghdad. So we shifted up there, and then operated in Baghdad, executing high risk warrants, high risk targets. And then the rotation after that, I was there again. And then the subsequent rotation. So, I mean, it was very kinetic after that, which, I wasn't complaining. It was busy, kept your mind off of the time. And, it just allowed you to really just, focus and stay sharp.
Did it ever bother you to this point that you got to Pakistan, never touched ground in Afghanistan, and now you've been back and forth to Iraq 5 different times, and you're going, am I ever going to get to Afghanistan?
No, it didn't really bother me. I mean, it was just I knew at some point they were probably gonna, flip things around. And so, I didn't really dwell on it too much. I knew at some point the odds were that I would find myself back in Afghanistan.
Did did you end up losing anybody in Iraq?
Yeah, there were some guys from my company, from my battalion, that we lost. I mean, thankfully the casualties weren't that high. But when I mean, it's all relative, I mean, if you're just simply talking numbers, right? If you're talking a small organization like Special Forces, if you sustain 1 or 2 losses, I mean, relatively, those are heavy losses. The rotation that we started out in Iskandariyah, that was pretty tough because Sergeant Major Brad Connor was killed early that deployment. He was a first group company sergeant major. I had a buddy that was in that company that I'd been in the Q course with. He lost his junior. But that conventional unit that we were, kind of co-located with when I was in Iskandariyah, in the first, I want to say first half or first quarter of their deployment, they had sustained, I believe it was about 60 casualties. And I want to say at least half of those were fatalities. It's just one of those things. It sucks to lose any life, regardless of whether or not they're in your unit, or if they're one of your brothers and sisters in another unit. But yeah.
How did you personally deal with the loss? I
I
mean, does
mean,
it get your head at all? Does it bother you? Do you just put it aside and process it later? How did you deal with it?
yeah, I mean, I think in retrospect, right? I mean, I retired in 2020. I joined the Army in '96. So a lot of my experiences, they're fairly far back in the past. And since being retired for 3 years, having worked in the corporate world in a couple of places, I've realized that my manner of coping was pretty much putting everything in little containers, little glass jars, and putting it on the shelf. And right, wrong, or whatever, I think that it's a coping mechanism that you're forced to when you're in that environment at that pace. Trying to unpack that in the 4 months that you're back home before you got to go back over for another deployment. in my mind, I viewed it as counterproductive. I just wanted to, bottle it up and focus forward. Now on the backside, every time that shelf gets bumped a little bit, a couple of those glass bottles fall, and shit comes out, and it's one of those things that you gotta deal with, you gotta face, and I guess I'm in that phase now where that's my next mission, of unpacking all that and dealing with it.
Do you wish that you had done it sooner?
Yeah, I do. I have a lot of regrets.
Like what?
I have regrets of the impacts on my wife and son. I have regrets on the impacts with my relationships, with family, other friends. It's, but that's in the past. I can't do anything about what happened. What I can do is just face it, and it's tough. My son, our son, when I first showed up to 10th group, he was only about 9 months old. He was born at the tail end of the Q course, the medic course portion, and so all he knew growing up was dad's gone, dad's in war, and now he'll be 20 in December, and it's our relationship is a very rough relationship, in terms of understanding, in terms of perspective, and it's the same with my wife. It's we've got good days, we've got bad days, and a lot of the things that come up that we've got to deal with are resulting from roughly 20 years of being in the GWAT, 20 years of my career in GWAT, focused on nothing but that. So yeah, it's the next mission.
I wonder, how many conversations you've had about what you've gone through with your son, and with your wife. Do you talk about it when it comes up, or do you get asked about it a lot? Where is that?
No, I don't get asked about it. That couldn't be further from, how it goes down. Very much, it's viewed as, hey, let's kind of put this chapter, behind us, and let's move forward. And, as a part of moving forward, it's, moving through all the crap that, built up from that. My son, one thing that, I do, really feel blessed with is the ability for my wife to, be able to be such a strong parent, through all of that with my son, because, he very much is who he is because of her strength. One might think, oh yeah, but dad was this, badass Green Beret, super strong, did all this stuff. But, that I wasn't around. And, it was the strength of my wife. It was her tenacity. It was her perseverance, her resilience, to be able to get through all of that. And I think in large part, my son, adopted a lot of that resiliency, a lot of that, tenacity and perseverance, and ability to deal, emotionally with everything that was going on. And, now that, he's a sophomore in college, he'll be 20 in December, we're starting to have, some deep conversations about things. He just came to me last week or earlier this week, and he said that one of his assignments for a psychology class is interviewing somebody, with a very difficult background, or that's experienced
Traumatic
things.
experience, yeah.
Yeah. And so, it kind of hit me when he asked me. He was like, "Hey, yeah, I want to interview you." And it made me feel good, that at least we're moving in a positive direction.
Yeah, I mean, listen, that's a journey. And you know, even my 8-year-old twins sometimes will pose questions about what daddy did in the war. And they're never easy to answer. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, my first thought, when they ask that question is always just go to, if you only knew, man. But it's just like you sort of are smart enough to hold your tongue and
Yeah.
give them a much more plain answer that they can easily understand.
I think you bring up a good point though, with your comment, like if you only knew, um, I think about that, quite a bit when I am having, those discussions, and, whether it's with my wife, my son, or, friends, work colleagues, whatever. Um, I think there's actually a lot that I'm glad people don't know.
No.
Because, I mean, just from a personal standpoint, I mean, I know what I saw, I know what I did, I know what I experienced, and I know, I know what kind of baggage comes with that. And, for people to not have to carry that around, to not
Yeah.
have to deal with
No,
that.
I understand. I want to interject here though, and that because that's part of our problem, right? Like in general, we take the burden, right? If you only knew, you don't know. Thank God. I'll carry that burden. I'll carry the burden of knowing. You don't have to. And that sort of almost adds on to the self-inflicted wound of this whole thing, because one, we automatically underestimate, what the other people can handle. That's number one, because some people can handle those conversations and can handle those things, right? Like, I mean, if you had asked me before I got to combat, would I be able to handle it? I probably would have said no. After, I was able to handle it. I handled it well, air quoting well, like I was able to handle it better than I thought I would, and it goes back to that whole thing. And I'm sure you've seen it. You maybe even in assessment selection, there are big, strong, tough guys who fold like a lawn chair. And then there are little whippy guys who somehow just keep pushing ahead and getting through. So
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was going to be able to handle, what I can't. And so, our mistake is underestimating others. You can't handle what I know. So I will carry that burden for you. And in reality, that's not our job anymore, right?
That's fair point.
That's a different conversation. Here, it's no. Someone should say, "Tell me the burden. I'll tell you if I can't handle it." Right?
Yeah.
We just assume they can, and that's why when you say that, because I think the same way, I feel the same thing. If you're only a kid, I hope you never know. I didn't even say, and I would say this plainly: I didn't even come close to seeing half the shit you did. I didn't even come close to seeing half the shit a lot of it. I know what I saw and what I did. Nobody ever has to do what I did. Right? Like plain, and that's not a levels thing and who did more and who saw more. That has nothing to do with it. But individually, I wouldn't want anybody else to go through that because I know what it's done to me just the same as you do. However, again, it's us choosing to bear that burden when we don't have to.
Yeah.
In reality, remember, there are professionals who are trained to be able to handle it, that we actually neglect and ignore, that is their sole focus in life, is to handle other people's shit.
Very well stated. Yeah.
So, that's the only reason I don't want to cut you off, and I apologize, but I know what you're feeling, right? Like, I understand what you're feeling. I want to do the same for my loved ones too. I don't want you to have that burden. You don't need another, this. Why even worry about it? Well,
yeah.
But then your burden gets heavier.
Yeah. And, the paradoxical nature of it is it feels good to be able to talk about it, get it out, and, achieve a certain level of understanding with others. But, it's still difficult.
Of course. And it's, the burden, here's the problem. The burden never gets lighter for us, right? Unless you unload it.
Yeah.
The weight just stays the same. And in certain cases, it gets heavier because other stuff of life now sits on top of that burden, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And
so what happens is when you try to unload that burden, now you have to go through life to do it. And that's the effect you were talking about on your wife, on your son, and everything else. Now I gotta get through all the stuff on top of me in my life first to get the burden off. And there's collateral damage there. Intended or otherwise. It's just the reality of what we live with and what we go through as combat veterans.
Yeah. And, it kind of like, I talked before, we get very comfortable with that chaos. And,
Yes.
When we don't have the chaos, we look for chaos in order to feel comfortable.
It's funny. It's so good. You go through personal things in your life, and I'm not going to turn this into Ryan Neel therapist here, but I can't tell you how many times the thought creeps in my head, man, I wish I was just back in combat, because combat seems easier some days.
Oh, yeah.
Like that chaos. And I've said this repeatedly on the show. If all you ask me to do is stay alive in combat, that's like kind of the easiest task there. Although it's as difficult as it is, and there's a lot of factors that depend on how you stay alive, but it's singular in focus, and it's easy to align all your thoughts to there without distraction. Dealing with kids, ex-wife, money, jobs, people, friends, family, everything else, it's like, man, combat was a hell of a lot easier than this.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, I don't know how many times I've said, man, being back in Iraq or Afghanistan would be, so much easier. It'd be, more enjoyable, whatever. And that's probably not a right.
No, it's not a sane statement at all. No. There's a lot of therapists out there who hear this conversation and go, look at these two idiots. No, you don't want to be back there. It's better.
But it's, again, I think you hit it on the head is, it's very simplistic. You have a mission, and, at the base of it, it's you either live or you die. I mean, that's really it.
Not only that, the path to accomplishment is fairly clear, and there are steps laid out. There's no guesswork involved. Trying to figure out what your wife is thinking when she's mad at you involves a lot of guesswork. Involves a lot of, assuming and hoping I get it right and choosing the right words and everything else. That becomes a problem in your brain. Figuring out how to assault on an objective. Hey, we got steps here. We've done this before. We've practiced this. I know how to start this. I know how to finish it. I know how to get out of it. Done.
Yeah.
There's no thinking involved.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's also fairly finite. You don't really, you've got some things that'll, spin off into other things, branches, sequels, but, it's fairly finite. Whereas, home, family, relationships, work, all of that. It's very fluid. It ebbs and flows. Your emotions are up and down. There's no real defined right way. Like you said, there's no defined steps, and, there's no manuals, field manuals or other things that you can refer back to for, kind of an algorithmic, response. And, that I think is a lot of the challenge as well. Is reframing from that one mindset into a completely different one, where you're not necessarily dealing with common-minded people. You're not necessarily dealing with people that have a body of shared experiences and whatnot. You're not necessarily dealing with people that are singularly focused on an objective and will do nothing but work on achieving that until the end. But on the other side of that, I don't know if the converse is wrong or bad. I think that everybody looks at things differently, and it has to be appreciated.
100%. No, 100%. Look at it. I think it's this is definitely a journey. And for what it's worth, I've shared this a little bit. I didn't really start mine until 15 years after I had I had most of the stuff happen to me, or 10 years after my last deployment. When you talked about those mason jars, when enough of them get rattled and fall off the shelf, there's a big old mess sit down there. You got to start cleaning that shit up. And you're almost forced to a point of critical mass where you have to make a decision on whether you're going to clean the stuff up or you're just going to let it sit there on the floor and continue to just be messy. So
the other thing that you have to make a shift in mindset is, when everything's, done, you're out of uniform, you retire, you separate, whatever, that chapter's over, right? Yes, it was a large portion of your life. It shaped you in many ways. But it's not the rest of your life. You are moving on. And, it's, I think that a lot of people struggle with, well, I was, this big bag Green Beret, I was, whatever, I struggle with it at times, thinking back to, some of the pretty awesome things that I was able to do, that I was a part of, that I shared with teammates and whatnot. Those are big things. And then you shift out and you have to accept that things are different, and you got to find the joy in the new things that you have in your life to replace, those things that are no longer there.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Is there one particular thing that sticks with you more than the other, whether it's an incident or just a feeling or whatever it may be?
There's two things. They're kind of different, but they're the two things that I think about, really a lot. Was a young kid that I worked on, who ended up passing away once he got to the OR. I think about that situation and everything, for a lot of reasons. But then the other thing that I think about a lot is, the impact of everything on my wife and son, and my relationship. I think a lot of, maybe if I wouldn't have gone SF, if I would have just kind of chosen a path that was real comfortable, that would have been a desk job, admin, whatever. If I would have gotten out, and found some regular civilian job, what would life have been? What would our relationship be? How would my son and I be? Whatever. But I think about that, and at the same time I kick my ass for thinking about that, because it's not going to do any good, dwelling on those things. I think appreciating those is definitely necessary, but appreciating it from a standpoint of learning and then working to, through the process of moving forward.
Yeah. Look, it's one piece at a time, one step at a time, one brick at a time, and understanding that you don't have to solve the problem all at once.
Yeah. And then you can let your guard down. You can,
yeah.
You don't have to have that armor up, that facade of, the big bag Green Beret, whatever. Whatever you did, it's no longer you, except, the new persona, open up.
Do you ever think about what if that Alive Day, that explosion in 2005 had left you physically different than what you were, what your life would be like?
Yeah.
Does that give you any perspective, or is that just one of those things where, like, hey, I know it would be different?
I don't, it's one of those things that, I've got friends that, lost limbs, and whatnot, and considered and continued to serve. I would like to think that I would have had a, supremely resilient mindset, and been able to recover and be back at it. like some of the, badasses that I know. I'll plug his name, Chris Corbin. Phenomenal dude. He was actually a classmate of mine. We started out the 18 Delta course together. Some things happened, and then he ended up becoming an 18 Charlie. But he lost both of his legs below the knee in Afghanistan, and I'm pretty sure the timeline was right at about 6 months post injury. He was right back at it. And another buddy of mine, he lost his leg in Afghanistan early on, and he ended up taking command again, even with a prosthetic. Chip's a badass. Chip, I knew Chip before he went back to SF. Before I went into SF, he was the mortar platoon leader of the headquarters, 81 mortars. When I was a scout squad leader in HHC first 187. And I would have liked to think that I had that mindset. I would have hoped, but I don't know, because it's tough.
It is. And always looking for perspective, right? Always looking for a way to kind of reframe what we're up against now that you're sort of out of the limelight, or not in the game anymore. You're kind of left to your own devices and your own thoughts, which sometimes can be a very dangerous place to be.
Yeah.
What do you miss most about the Green Beret life?
I miss the camaraderie. I miss the the shared vision. The focus, right? Everybody to a T on the team. In the company, whatever. We were all focused and driving towards the same thing. We were supporting each other, and that's probably the biggest. The excitement. The going out to the ranges, the airborne ops. Combat. I miss that, but I would say those are the primary things that I miss. Just that family, that close bond that you have, where for a fact that person to your left and your right, they've got your back no matter what.
Yeah. Well, you still have people who got your back no matter what. They're just family now, not people wearing a uniform. But and again, I think that there's still that natural learning curve and progression and all that. So give yourself a little bit of grace with it. What have you been doing since you've left the military?
So as a part of the retirement process, I linked up with an organization called Hiring Our Heroes. Mm-hmm. And through that led to a corporate fellowship as an operations manager at Amazon. And at the end of it, I was offered a full-time position as an L6 operations manager. And I did about a year and a half, if you consider the fellowship and all that. About a year and a half at Thornton, Colorado, the fulfillment center up there, Den 3. And then I knew the fulfillment center down here in Colorado Springs, where my wife and I and son still live. I knew that was going to be opening up, in about a year or two when I signed on, and I worked to be able to get there. I launched that facility, was there for a year. And another opportunity presented itself in telecom, and I made the jump last August of 2022 over to telecom, and that's where I'm currently at. So I think true to form, that I've had for all my career, I've continually sought positions that would challenge me, environments to not become comfortable and force new growth and understanding. And I feel very fortunate that I have had very good experiences at Amazon and my current employer, and in terms of providing those growth opportunities and the ability to grow and nurture my perspective and understanding.
Well, look, it's good. I'm glad that you are settling into civilian life and a career and family and just being regular old Ryan now, which is never bad.
I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do when I grow up, though.
Yeah, there you go. There is always that, right?
Yeah.
Look, it's never an easy transition. It never will be an easy transition, but I will say that there's light at the end of the tunnel. And, remind yourself that much like everything else, you just got to frame this the right way. There is a mission. There is a goal and an end state for all this. You just set your path purposefully the same way you would for any other, special operations mission, and you'll have similar success. There's too many successful people who wore the same hat that you did, literally and figuratively, that have figured out a way so you can do it too. And I genuinely mean that. And I'm wishing you the best. And, I'm thankful that you shared your story with us, man. It's crazy. I wish we had more time to dive through the rest of it, but we'd be here for days at this rate. But, I always extend the invitation, man. If you ever, need somebody to talk to who knows the path, who knows the rigors, who also knows what you don't want anybody else to know.
Yep.
I'm always here, to everybody who comes on this show. It's I've learned a lot from so many guests, and I've learned, better ways to be more effective at helping people and better ways of listening. And I do love the catharsis of this whole thing, not only for the guests, but for me as well. It makes it a little bit easier on me, because every time somebody comes on, I get a new perspective about what people are going through. Right. And it's just
absolutely. That shared perspective, collective perspective.
100%. So, again, appreciate your time, your honor, your candidacy. Love the background. Keep rocking it. And Ryan, Neel, thanks for being part of the Hazard Ground.
Appreciate it, Mark.
You've been listening to the Hazard Ground podcast, hosted by Mark Zinno. If you have an interesting story to tell and you'd like to be on the show, send us an email at producer@hazardground.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.